So I thought that today I would share some of the things that I feel I regret saying. One of the things that I regret saying the most, and one of my most embarrassing moments ever, because I'm starting to realize how incredible it is to go by how things feel rather than how I think they are. So it's kind of an amazing, like, full circle that the thing that you never wanted to mention, never even wanted to think about, but kept thinking about anyway because it really hurt to think about, that you would make a YouTube video talking about it, using it as an example. But this is kind of how strange loopy everything seems to be, and I guess this is the true, like, forgiveness, the true self-forgiveness, that things we feel bad about are forgiving. They are forgiving. So, um, one of my most embarrassing moments was I was 16 years old. I was in a junior in high school. And I was like very Christian and still had a lot of repressions that went along with that. But I was pretty open minded about some things. So most of the church communities had very fixed ideas about things, and ideas that I really disagreed with. So I didn't fit in with anything. And so the high school I went to had it was semi-private. And so if you were, it just so happened that if you were like a family who attended the largest Baptist church in the nearby town, then you would be sort of, this was my perception anyway at the time, that you would be sort of like part of the in crowd, and like if people knew you and your parents were successful, and there was this whole lot of like how financially successful people were and what their family status was and how respected they were and all of that going on. So the school was really conservative. Like, we still had pretty conservative dress codes, and there was a lot of like to do about appearances and stuff, but at the same time it wasn't fully private. So we still had um some like very like liberal teachers, and like in the mix. And like some of the things that happened, I just still can't believe happened in a school that was public. But if you think about the world being like a reflection of you and the law of attraction, and what you see and what you remember being all like you creating that, it's kind of like incredible to me to like see how I was all a mix of those things. And there I went to this high school that was this like crazy mix of things, but still mostly conservative. So in high school junior English class, we read The Crucible. And for some reason, like, I hated anything to do with witches or Salem or anything like that. And it just, like, it felt dark. I hated reading the book. And I would go through these spells in high school where I would just kind of like zone out. Like, I couldn't engage my brain to pay attention, especially in classes, and a lot of it was anxiety and like caring about how I was seen, and just not feeling like trying to like figure out all these things at once at that age and everything. And so in this class, like, I'd been in high school 3 years and hardly ever spoken in the class. Like, I'd hardly ever raised my hand. I would rather like fail a quiz than ask a question and understand something. I was that afraid of speaking up in class. So in junior year, we started reading like plays and stuff, and we started like reading the parts. And I got assigned this part, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I just quickly got into the flow and loved reading the character and loved reading out loud. So this was sort of this change for me. So then we start reading The Crucible, and my English teacher decides that we're going to read the most sexual scene out loud. And so she picks who is going to read the part for Abigail. And this is like the most popular, or like second most popular in my mind, girl in the class. And she's, like, to my standards, she's very reserved. She's not somebody I feel like worthy of speaking to or want to get in the way of. And so nobody wants to volunteer to read the part of John. And it's like this very sexual scene, and there's like this something about a stallion, and yeah. So I'm zoned out at this point, and I think like I didn't even do the homework. So I hadn't read this scene, and I didn't know what was happening, and I just didn't get the book. Like, I just read the book, and I'm like, this is dark, this makes me feel depressed, I don't like this. So all I know, I like come back to earth from my daydreaming or zoning out, and all I know is the teacher's asking for someone to read. So I'm like, oh, screw it, I'll just volunteer to read. And I have no idea what I'm volunteering to do. And so the teacher is very kind, and she's like, no, I think we'll pick someone else. And she like let me off the hook. And then I realized what I did. And then at the time I had this very outspoken friend who would just like no filter whatsoever. Again, law of attraction. Like, you can see why I attracted this as like the friend that I spent the most time with. And she laughs about it, and I just felt horrible. Like, I cannot describe how awful I felt about it. And like the whole uncomfortable position of two girls reading the part, and like where I was at the time with religion, and where the whole school was at the time of religion. And so for whatever reason, like, the whole theme of the Crucible just completely went over my head. Like, we studied it, I knew it, but I could not see like the obvious thing about how funny this was, how funny this whole thing happened. And so let me just read you the SparkNotes summary of the theme of the Crucible. In the Crucible, the idea of goodness is a major theme. Almost every character is concerned with the concept of goodness because their religion teaches them that the most important thing in life is how they will be judged by God after they die. The characters want to be seen as good by the whole village. Yup. There you go. That's how life works. And so, like, looking back at it, it's absolutely hilarious. But like, the point of doing this kind of thing is to show you that every time you feel bad about some perspective, there's something incredible there to understand. And there's some sort of like hilarious joke you've set yourself up for to get finally. And so here we keep going. So one of the things that I said that I felt the worst about, that I regretted, that was just like one of the meanest things I ever said. And this one's really funny too. So my husband, like, I don't know if we were married. We must have been engaged or just about to get married. But anyway, he graduated college in 2009 and like with a civil engineering degree. And there were really like talented, qualified people out of work in that field. And I remember going to his graduation, and all the speakers were like, in their speeches, you could see that they were very like startled and scared for the future. And it was the weirdest time to be graduating. And so we had this like whole plan to move away, and we ended up staying like where we grew up. And all our plans ended up changing because of the financial crash and his graduating then. And so he like had to find a job, like to wait until things opened up, and there weren't even like basic jobs available for him. And so he was going to apply for this teaching job. And we were at this family meal, and I made like a joke about and just like poking at him. And I said, you know what they say, those who can do and those who can't teach. And like I immediately, and after that, every time I thought about that, I felt awful. Like it was a horrible thing to say about him in front of his family. And then like me saying that and then wanting to become a teacher. It's funny, right? So every time it's so crazy and amazing and humbling and funny to realize that like every time you feel bad about something, there's something like much deeper there you're not seeing. And it's like the example with me in high school. I couldn't see, I was so stuck in that perspective that I couldn't see what the theme of the play was. I couldn't like put myself, I couldn't see the whole picture of it and how funny it was and the repression that was going on all around me and the judgment of like homosexuality that was in the culture, in the school, and then me just like zoning out and then volunteering to do that, and then me like further going into shyness and feeling like, okay, this is why I don't speak out in class, but realizing it was all the more reason to speak out about things. So this video was kind of like amazingly healing and going all full circle. But in everyday life, it's like the little ways that perspectives come up that don't feel good, that we're not willing to just sit with because we already know how things are. So it's the importance of like stepping back and clearing your mind, not avoiding it and not like pushing it away because again, it keeps popping up, but being really curious about it can allow you to see the big picture. A couple years ago, I had this really huge shift where my perspective completely changed, and all of these like memories, both good and both bad, came up, and I saw them in a new light, and I saw these crazy connections and this kind of hilarity that was there, and like how it went together with things. And so you can do this with any kind of anything you're ready to see. But if you hold yourself at this level of like, I have to deal with this or I have to see this in a new perspective, you aren't going to be able to see the humor there. So it really is kind of like going with the faith of not knowing, which is both knowing and not knowing at the same time. And then these like kind of understandings and these reframings flood in. And a lot of the blockages are like, um, we think to not care about something has a negative connotation. Um, Even though like love not being selective or unconditional is sort of like the same as not caring about something. And so often we create these kind of like painful, traumatic moments when we really start to care about like one person and we want to be like one thing in exclusion of other things, and we kind of like lose that big picture perspective or that um meaningless which that non-perspective, which really is the big picture perspective, really is not a perspective at all.